When I look at the events that transpired last week with the police shooting deaths of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, I see a vicious cycle getting ready to start itself all over again. Now, when I look at those two shooting deaths of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, it takes me back to 2014 when two grand juries in Ferguson and in Staten Island here in New York decided not to indict two police officers, Darren Wilson and Daniel Panaleo, for the deaths of Eric Garner and Michael Brown. Because in the aftermath of those grand juries not choosing to indict in those cases, we saw people taking to the streets, people marching and protesting, protesters telling the world that Black Lives Matter. And then, in a couple of days afterward, we saw a individual in Philadelphia, after assaulting his girlfriend, get on a bus and drive up to New York to murder police officers Rafael Ramos and Wen Jian Liu in an effort to get revenge and avenge Eric Garner and Michael Brown. And when I look at what happened in the case of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, I see the vicious cycle starting all over again. Because in the aftermath of those murders of officers Ramos and Wen Jian Liu, what happened here in New York is people got polarized. And after people got polarized, instead of it being about trying to heal the relationship between the black community and the police department, we started seeing white people starting to turn into a race issue where they were starting to call out accusations against black people, and we saw black people making accusations against white people. And things got super heated until everybody decided to back away from their positions. And with this Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, I see the same cycle starting all over again. We have, in the aftermath of the deaths of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, we saw Black Lives Matter and a whole bunch of people marching and protesting in the streets. And in this case, we saw this pro-black militant, Mika Xavier Johnson, coming out with a rifle to kill white cops soon after. But the big difference between the events in 2014 and the events of 2016 is that we're seeing that these days things are escalating and things are getting actually hotter because your Mika Xavier Johnson decided he didn't want to wait for the due process of the court system because he just decided he was going to take justice in his own hands. And I believe he decided to take that action because he saw the ineffectiveness of the Obama administration to take action in the cases of people like Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and he feels, in his opinion, when he was alive, that the only action he could take was to take recourse against these white cops because the American legal system just isn't working. And that's why a lot of people are feeling frustrated these days because they look at the Obama administration's ineffective leadership and in handling these situations and they don't see anybody taking charge. And that's why I say that this is a vicious cycle. And I see it's turning into more of a downward spiral because I look at these incidents and how they're escalating. You know, these police officers kill black men, black people take to the streets to protest, and now we have these radical individuals who feel no sense of recourse from the government and no way of getting justice from the government. And now they're feeling like they have to take some sort of action. And that's all, again, due to the ineffective leadership of your state governments and your Obama administration. Your Obama administration, as I see it, should have been trying to do something to nip this in the bud way back when George Zimmerman murdered Trayvon Martin. Unfortunately, his attorney general, the coward that he is, Eric Holder, decided not to press any charges or file any charges, and then he decided to resign. And right now, with the case of Eric Garner, your current attorney general, Loretta Lynch, would rather let the case fall into limbo while she makes statements about the Pulse nightclub, pretty much showing us how little concern your black president has regarding this escalating race issue in between black men and police officers in black communities. When we look at your Barack Obama's actions, they pretty much are destabilizing the country and pretty much putting it on a bad course because we don't need speeches anymore. We really need some sort of policy enacted to send a message to all of these outsiders and rebels out here who are looking to cause havoc and mayhem. And we also need a message sent to rogue police officers that when you use excessive force, you will be punished because we need these measures in place to maintain a semblance of order. Because when I look at what happened in Dallas with Mika Xavier Johnson, it is showing me that the situation in America is starting to deteriorate and things are escalating because your Mika Xavier Johnson didn't even wait for a grand jury. He didn't wait for the court system to go through due process. And things like when that happened, it showed me that things are speeding up because the previous individual, at least he waited for the judicial process to go through before he decided to act out. But now we see this individual, things are escalating. And I have a feeling that the next situation, if we do not nip this in the bud, may get even worse. And this may really set off a powder keg because, I look at these situations where black men are being killed by white police officers and non-black individuals like your George Zimmerman, and it really needs to be checked by state and local governments before we have an anarchistic situation. Because when I look at what your Mika Xavier Johnson did, that was like a borderline anarchistic behavior right there. You have this pro-black individual who decides he's going to take the law in his own hands because he sees that the legal system just isn't working for him, and he sees no sense of leadership coming from your state government, your federal government, in any shape, way, shape, or form. When we look at that situation, we see the failure of leadership. Nobody's taking the lead. The country is running on autopilot, and people think making speeches and going to rallies is going to do something. No, we need some sort of policy that lets both sides know that there is a line in the sand, there's rules to follow, there's standards to be maintained, and if we're going to maintain some sort of public safety, we need public policy. Because when you have brutal cops like the ones who choked out Eric Garner still on the job 2 years later, that's setting a policy that creates a culture in the police department that tells bad cops that their job is okay, that they don't have to worry about being fired. When you have bad cops like the one who shot Alton Sterling and the ones who shot Philando Castile not being held accountable, that sets a standard that tells bad cops that it's okay, and it creates that culture that tells them that they don't have to be responsible for protecting public safety. And when you have on the federal level, a president who does not take executive action to deal with this, it sets a culture and a standard in the country that says that America, does not have a standard for safety and a standard for judicial behavior regarding these matters, and that it's open. It's like an open season on not only black people but any American people who disagree with whatever narrative or whatever opinion a police officer has, and the police officer has to follow the law. And if there is no law, then we have nothing but anarchy, and that allows people like your Mika Xavier Johnson to feel like it's perfectly fine for them to go out and take a gun and mete out their own brand of justice. And this is where we have a complete collapse and a complete decline of leadership in America. And a lot of people aren't looking at that big picture regarding their own country, and they don't see the vicious cycle that is happening, and it's again escalating and spinning out of control. They don't see how things are destabilizing and spinning out of control because most people to these days are caught up in their emotions, and they're not thinking logically about the aftermath of events like the ones in Ferguson and in Staten Island with Eric Garner and Michael Brown, or what George Zimmerman did with Trayvon Martin, or many of these other cases with black men. They're not seeing how all of these events tie into each other, and they're leading to an escalation that, again, is getting ready to take the country in a bad direction that may eventually lead into anarchy. And this is not a good place to be. And I look at the ineffective and weak leadership of your Obama administration, which thinks making speeches is constructive action, when we need executive action to create policy to to make America safe again and make it safe for black people and people of other and white people and people of all races to have trust in their police departments and trust that their neighborhoods and communities will be made safe by your police. That's what people really want, but they're not getting that because we have ineffective leadership in the White House, and we have ineffective, incompetent organizations like your Black Lives Matter, trying to coordinate rallies where they don't have a focus or a direction for what goals they want to pursue. They're just sitting out there telling you that Black Lives Matter, but not telling you exactly what they want to achieve, what they want to accomplish, what direction they want to go in. It's just a bunch of people making a lot of noise, but not many people having much to say regarding this issue. Because when I look at this case of your Alton Sterling, your Philando Castile, and I see your legal system not taking any action, that's what causes things to get bad. So your Mick Xavier Johnsons have the reason to go out here and commit these mass murders. I mean, you really have to connect the dots with all these situations to see how bad things are getting. And if you don't nip it, if you don't have leadership to nip it in the bud, it's going to get a whole lot worse out here. And I look at how bad it is, and this is it's like I see the downward spiral, but I don't know if anyone else sees the downward spiral regarding, race relations, police brutality, and the politics of America. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.